Welcome to Syntax. Today we're talking about remote functions in RPC in Svelte. I'm going to say off the bat, this is the solution for RPC, for data loading, for anything. I don't want to use anything else on any other platform, and we're going to show you why. If I'm using React, it better look like this. So we're going to be breaking down what these things are, just the general approach for data loading, how it kind of takes the server client side of it all and makes it really nice and palatable while keeping a nice separation still. My name is Scott Tolinsky. I'm a developer from Denver, and with me as always is Wes Boss. What's up, Wes?
Hey, excited to talk about this because I dove into several of these like RPC libraries in the last couple of weeks, and it turns out BetterAuth has one called Better Call. Hano has one, Eliza has one, Cloudflare has one that's called Cap'n Web or something like that. Like It's Cap'n Crunch. And like there are a lot of the like this idea of like obviously we talked about TRPC. We had them on the podcast as well in the past, but there's so many different implementations of this RPC, and I'm excited to see what Svelte's take on it is.
Yeah, this is something that I think we've both personally felt. The Syntax site is built with SvelteKit. It uses the load functions for data, and I think one of the things that always felt odd about that was like all of your data, all of your refreshing, your invalidation, even your form actions, they all kind of live at that root of the route level. Like on any given route, it exists on a page level. And like in a componentized world, that just felt weird, right? Sometimes you were defining actions on a route and then having to call them or refresh more data than you'd want or reinvalidate a load function. So I was really excited when they announced this at Svelte Summit, and I've been doing quite a bit with this, like really quite a bit. In fact, Wes, you might be interested to know, I've been going nuts on the new Syntax website. So we've been working on a new Syntax website.
I've been getting the emails, brother. Yeah. Man, you're motoring.
I'm motoring, and it is like, I ripped out our ORM, so we're using Drizzle now. I changed from MySQL to Postgres. I rewrote all of the data loading in Svelte remote functions. I have done a shocking amount of things. And Courtney was like, does this stress you out? Like, do you regret making these big choices? And I said, no, I love this. This is what I love. I love
Scott's middle name is Rewrite Tolinsky. Did you know that?
I love taking everything out of the cabinet and putting it all on the countertop and then meticulously putting it back in and maybe 3D print some boxes or something. And that's what I'm doing right now.
I just like pushing the stuff to the back of the, like we lived in our house for like 3 years now. And I like got up on a stool. We have this really deep cabinet and I was finding like hot sauce from like 3 or 4 years ago. I was like, I should probably do a Tolinsky on this right now.
I love taking it all out. And then in the web dev is absolutely the same. But at this point I needed to like rework the entire data structure of the website anyway. So it was like, if I'm already reworking the entire schema and how the data is connected, and like I might as well do it in technologies I actually like if it's easy enough to just migrate it. Yeah. Which it has been. Yeah. So it's been a trip, but let's talk about remote functions because I've been using these things like crazy. Basically, as of today, when we're recording this may change soonish. To get these things going, you do need to tick 2 different experimental options in a Svelte config: remote functions true and async true. So these APIs are used in combination. The async Svelte, where you can just throw wait tags in your Svelte components and just do that, and it just all works. Remote functions, though. Remote functions exist where you have a special file name. It's something.remote.ts or JS. These can live straight up anywhere. And a .remote file name is great because that lets you know off the jump this is taking place on the server. You don't have to worry about client, server, where's this code running? Am I importing something like a database or something insecure in this? You know that it's a .remote, it's a server-based file. So that's really great, right? And then from within a normal Svelte component, you can just straight up import that query, mutation, whatever. We'll talk about those in a second. But you can just straight up import those as a function and call that function in your code. So if you want to, let's talk about the first one of these, which is like querying data. In a .remote function, you have a query. It's essentially like a query function that takes in another function as a parameter, or like a schema that you can then use to validate your data. Either way, you have a function. That function can do database calls, returns data. In the client side, you're just calling that function. Bingo, your data's there. You don't have to worry about routes. You don't have to worry about paths. You don't have to worry about anything. It's like, I'm calling this function and it's going to go grab me my data. At its very most simple, you could have a query function that just returns Scott, and then on the client, you could say get Scott, and then it just gives you Scott.
Let me maybe explain to the listener if they're like what's the benefit of that. So typically when you have like a website, right, you have like a back end, you have a front end, and then you need some way to communicate between those two, right? And you might make like an API where you can like fetch endpoints. You might make like an open API schema, so that you can share types from the back end to the front end. But with a lot of these like RPC, like React Server components, Svelte remote functions, the way that it works is you simply just import the function from your server JavaScript and run it in your client JavaScript. And then there is a little bit of magic that happens between those two where you're not actually importing the client side code into your, the server code into your client. You're simply just importing something that will interface over the network, if you're calling that from client to the server, or if it's server rendered, it's just going to run it all on the server. Is that a fair description of it?
A perfectly fair description of it. Now, when this gets really powerful is combining with the fact that you can just await anywhere inside of Svelte components. So you could just, even inside of a loop, you could do like an each await get Scott, and then as the whatever, and the next thing you know, your data's just there. Or at the top level of a component, you can await in the top level of a component and get that data there as well and utilize it just like you typically would. And you don't even have to await it either. You can just run the query, and then you could also have a query.error, query.loading, or query.current, which then gets you access to the data when it's available. But if you want like server-side rendering and stuff, await it, and it just works. And if you want to see all of the errors in your application, you'll want to check out Sentry at sentry.io/syntax. You don't want a production application out there that, well, you have no visibility into in case something is blowing up and you might not even know it. So head on over to sentry.io/syntax. Again, we've been using this tool for a long time and it totally rules. All right.
This is, I wouldn't say one place, but this is another spot that Svelte has an up on React, because asynchronous components do not exist in the client-side React. They do exist on server-side React, and they have said that they're coming to client-side React. But if you want to simply await some data and then return the component, you can't do that on the client side, right? You have to have a use effect, or you have to use 10-stack query, something like that, and you have to show a loading state. And that's a pain in the butt, because in many cases, you simply want to just return nothing while it is loading. And I think also this goes in hand with the asynchronous component stuff, where I think the reason why Svelte and a lot of these places did not initially offer the ability to do fetching at a component level was because you get this like waterfall problem where like if you can fetch anywhere down the tree, then you can cause these waterfalls that can cause your render to be very, very slow. So React suspends Svelte async components. It solves that by allowing you to define how long and what you should actually wait for if you're server rendering, and then what you should simply just send to the client and then let it load at a later point.
Yeah, there's a cool query.batch in here too, which I'll show you. So you can basically just await that data and get it. You know, this is really great because I found this to be super clean. I found it to be way nicer than having data in the load function. That load function then passes to props. You're kind of hot potatoing this. This is more like you have your function call already. You call that, you get your data, you output it. You can await it. You can also, with async Svelte, you can await inside of derived too. So if you want to have something reactive coming in from the server, you can just toss an await get Scott inside of derived. That's super nice. So that's great. You can also pass in arguments. So these things are functions. You can pass in arguments. One really neat thing that they've done with all of the remote function stuff is that they've really leaned on Standard Schema. If you want to learn more about Standard Schema, we did a whole video on it. But basically, because it uses Standard Schema, that means that you can use any validation library out there to validate your inputs. So whether that's Zod, Valibot, Archetype, like whatever you want to use that uses Standard Schema, you can do so. And inside of your query, if you want to accept arguments here, the first parameter is just that validation. So in all of their docs, they use Valibot, which is really great, actually. I've been using Valibot. It's really nice. But if you could say, like, the query, the first parameter is a v.string, then you know that that requires a string. And then, of course, you get all of your TypeScript type checking. You get everything, like, really nice. I think that's one of the things that, as you'll see throughout this episode, is that the type checking story for all of this is so effortlessly good. And I think a large part of that comes down to their usage of Standard Schema, where you're not having to import types or whatever, and everything just kind of, whether it is client or server side, you have that type checking story the entire way. And
just
it's
flows
really nice.
right through.
Yeah.
Man, the Standard Schema guys, like the Zod and Archetype and Valibot, they like all worked on that. And like,
awesome.
Since we did the episode on that, I've seen it implemented in so many places, and it's become so much more important from like an AI perspective, because you can quickly get a schema of what your data actually looks like. But then like when I run into stuff that doesn't use Standard Schema, like the Chrome has like a beta right now for AI in the browser. And they use JSON schema.
Yeah.
And it sucks because like I have to now, I'm like, I just want to write it in Zod or whatever. Like
whatever.
For those who don't know, Standard Schema is this way that you can write your schema in Zod, Valibot, Archetype, Effect, whatever. And then it will there's a method on that will just convert it to a standard schema. And then you can also, many tools will also just consume a standard schema and convert it to whatever they need internally. And when a tool doesn't support standard schema, it's a pain in the butt now.
Yeah, because now you got to just use that tool. Where here, it's like I can pick my own from all. I just pulled up a list of all of the different ones, and there's so many: effect schema, type map, form data. I haven't even heard of most of these. Joy, have heard of that. Yup, have heard of that. So there's a whole bunch, and it's great that they are all kind of landing on Standard Schema, and even better that something like this would be like, you know what? Let's embrace that, and because of that, you can use whatever you want, which I love. There's also the ability to refresh your queries like manually. If you want to refresh your queries at any given point, you just hake the query, and then you call a .refresh method on it, and it will retrigger that as a function. So that's nice. There's also query.batch, which allows you to batch queries that happen within the same micro task. This is like in their example, they basically had a list of cities, and then they had a query that was like get weather from that city. And the query was taking place inside of an each loop in the component. So inside of an each loop, the city had a await get weather passing the city that's being passed in from the loop. And so if you were to do this without the batching, you could imagine each loop is going to be a call, right? A remote call. And that's not great. So if you use query.batch, it's going to batch all of them from the same task, and therefore it's going to not make a bunch of trips. Basically, it calls them all instead of having multiple calls. Yes.
So the benefit here is that like instead of sending off 10 requests for 10 cities, it sends an array of 10 requests once, and then those 10 things are executed on the server. And I guess you could have logic on your server to do them all at once, or you can just fire them all off at once, and then it sends all the responses back at once. So that helps both with network, but also I'm assuming it helps with rendering as well, because then you're not getting 10 render updates as they come in. You simply just get one render once it's all done.
Yes, and in this particular example, they're able, because it's in that loop, they're doing query.batch, like you said, they're getting all of the cities as an array, and it's one database call even instead of not just one API
exactly
call,
what I was
one
hoping
database
for.
Call. Yes, which is great.
That's nice. And there's no fussing with like promise.all or anything like that. It simply just sticks them all in.
Yes, for this use case, this rocks. Now let's talk about I think this, to me, is the killer feature of this all, because a lot of RPC systems have like a query system. You call the function, you get the data, right? There's another type of remote function called a form function, and the form function is the GOAT. This thing is awesome. So what's so cool about this is it's used for doing mutations, but not just general mutations. It's useful for doing mutations that take place on an HTML form. What this gets you is you're basically defining a form function using your standard schema stuff. You're passing in the inputs as the first parameter. The second parameter is an async function that does the work. But what's so awesome about this is not the server-side stuff, because the server-side thing functions exactly like you expect. Data comes in, you do the work, you return your stuff. But on the client side, the form function has a ton of stuff. So you spread the remote function onto a form, and then you get a progressively enhanced HTML form that works with or without JavaScript. You can spread out individual fields, and then you get individual field validation. So you write your standard schema on the server side that is then used to validate both the input into the function as well as the HTML input itself.
Wait, so it does... like it will render out the client side HTML and the JavaScript that is necessary for it to client side validate?
Yes.
Oh, this is almost getting like a Rails.
It's sick. This is sick because not only do you get that, right? So like the way you're spreading it out, you're spreading, like, let's say it's a create post. You're spreading create post .fields .title as text on a normal input tag. That then sets the input tag to type of text. It sets the ID. It sets all of the stuff that you would need to have a valid working form input. And that rules, man. I'll tell you what, I was working on a blog, and I use this in, like, I'm doing a tutorial course on, which it's going to be out by the time you are watching this. So check it out on Syntax if you want to learn how to do this. But like, man, to be able to build this, wrapping a label around an input and just saying, here, use that. It's read only. Like, man, this kicked ass. And I really, really liked working in this way. But it gets even better than that, because not only do you get those things, man, you get the validation component and stuff like that, but you can also get error messages. You can get, sorry, I'm
Scott,
just scrolling
can I
through
just
the
stop
docs.
you here? A couple episodes ago, you were fighting me and saying, I was showing you some form library that that did this.
Yes.
And you're like, I don't need that. I could just do that with the Svelte store and a couple lines of code.
Yeah.
And now,
that's what I'm doing
you're gushing over exactly this.
No, this is the platform. Mind you, this existed when
it's fine.
This existed when we recorded that episode. This is less code than that was too. I'll tell you that. My point is that if I want, not that I don't want a form library, it's that if I have a form library, I want it to do more for me. I don't want it to write all of the inputs. I don't want to have to write the update stuff. I don't want to have to write any of that stuff, because at some point it's like, what is the library doing for me? I want the library, or in this case, the platform, to do more for the forms.
Yeah.
I want to be able to pass it in a giant
all the way
object.
from schema to HTML inputs, validation, all of that stuff. And
yes,
I think that's what that library did. I can't recall the name of it right now, but I agree with you, because I am done writing CRUD forms where we simply update data.
Done. Yeah, and like, I do want to push back on that, because I agree. Like, I do think form libraries are really nice. I've built my own so many times, but I want the form library to do more. If I'm having to write out every little
tip
bit,
to tail, yeah.
yes, then at that point, like what that library did, I didn't see a benefit of it. Like, yes, it handled validation in those types of states, but you still had to write most of that code yourself. And a lot of that was because of how you work in forms in React in general. So that's my point. Also, this gives you client server, gives you the whole bingo bango, gives you everything here. There's also, you can do programmatic validation with it easily enough. If something becomes invalid, you can get the error message directly from here without having to write any of that. You don't have to have controlled inputs or anything like that. The state just kind of lives as a part of this remote function. So you don't have a controlled form. You don't have to deal with form data on yourself. You're just writing an HTML form that works in JavaScript or without JavaScript, and you get access to things like the individual error messages if something becomes invalidated. It's pretty sick.
That's great. I could see myself building even like a even higher level wrapper on this.
I'm already doing that. Yes.
At a very high level, just took all my inputs, figured out what kind of input they needed to be. Is it text area? Is it a number? Is it a date, etc.?
I love doing that. I'm already doing that. Yes. Huge fan of that. Yeah, it's really neat. And obviously, if you want to step in, and there's this whole progressive enhancement story, if you want to step in and do more with JavaScript in here, you can do a .enhance on here and get access to the entire process. So let's say you want to throw a toast message after you submit it, or you want to handle errors your own way, or you just want to step in there.
Yeah.
You can hook in, you can call await submit, you can call a form.reset if you want to.
And I assume that's the same as if you need to do something custom on like key up or something,
yes.
you can overwrite the default one.
Totally. You can also get in here and you can update the state programmatically of the form. Keep in mind, again, these aren't like controlled forms in that way, but you can get on here on an individual field by referencing mutation.fields. The field name, so .title.set, and you can programmatically update that. And you can grab the value at any point with fields.value and get access to that value live. So it ends up becoming a controlled input, but you didn't write one line of state. You didn't write a state updater. That state just lives with the form, and it's just so cool. Love all of that. When you're done with these, you can update your data. So there is the .refresh method that we called before. If you run .refresh, it is just running that query again. But there's also a .set method too on that. So let's say your mutation returns the new data, right? Like you did an update and that mutation actually returned the new data. You wouldn't have to then call a refresh and have it do another database query. You could use this .set to take that new data and just insert it as the result into that query and pass that along, avoiding an extra database call. They really thought of like everything here. There's great. Even optimistic UI you can do with this. So it's pretty sick. Form is goated. It's awesome. There's so much here. There's also a command query. So this lives in a remote function. This is basically just a mutation function that you would exist where you're not using an HTML form. But the form one makes it so easy. It's like, we should really be using forms for so much more, right? Like just wrap a form in a button. Yeah. So
everything should be like, there's the best way to transport data from the client to the server is with form data, right? Like form data is the best. You can have multiples of the same type. You can have images in there. You can have multi-part. It's just like all the Remix stuff is all built on form data as well. It's just one of those standards where everything going forward should be built on form data. And an added benefit is that you can simply use HTML forms if you want.
Yes. And also, like, in addition to that, something we do a lot on the syntax site, URL as the state using query parameters. State in query like parameters on the URL. Yeah. Yes, it's shareable. It's very nice. I think those two things are totally underrated. Forms, query parameters. The last one here is Prerender. Prerender is basically query, but it's something that only runs on build time. So if you're doing static sites, you only wanted this to ever run on build, you have the option to have the Prerender. So that's it. You have query, query batch, form, command, and prerender. Those are the different remote functions. They all kind of have a specific use case. And man, I've been ripping on this stuff, especially on the new syntax site, just like whether or not it is just throwing a database query in here or there or whatever, or changing our remote functions. I've just been really, as I get through with this, I'm writing less code. I'm getting better validation. The TypeScript stuff is so nice. I'm not having to import types and anything like that. All type safe across the board. It rules. Very big fan of this. So that's pretty much it. Do you have anything there? I do have one last thing. I got a question about,
is there anything related to caching in all of this?
Yeah, so caching, especially like it would still happen at like especially if you're doing server-side rendering, right? That's still happening at the page boundary, right? If you're caching that, it's still happening at the page boundary. I think there's going to be more with the caching of the data. There's some caching stuff with the pre-render queries using the cache API, but in general, on these functions, you're not setting cache headers. So
this is something that only Next.js, I think, has nailed. And it's the ability to do a component level cache. And a lot of people don't understand. So let me give an example. On my website, wesboss.com, I have the latest syntax podcast in the footer. And that is a syntax component in the footer of my website. And that does a fetch to the syntax API and then brings it back. And there's a problem where, and I have a couple other things in the footer of every page, right? And I cache the data there, right? But I kind of want to just cache the entire component as it's being rendered. And there's nobody except for Next.js that has the ability to cache a component level. Everybody's caching entire pages, which is sometimes okay. But what I end up with sometimes is that like if I cache an entire page, then the footer data is sometimes different from page to page because they've been cached at different points. So the other option is you can simply just cache the expensive stuff, which is the data fetching, and then just re-render every single time, or set like a really short re-render on it. But I'm curious to see, and I bet Svelte will roll out something like this as well, where you'll be able to just like cache this entire component for however long, and then do the whole stale while ready to validate headers on it, and that would be sick, because then you can reuse that component anywhere else on your dynamic site, but you don't have to spend the overhead of re-rendering that sucker and doing data fetching.
Well, let me tell you, Wes, I also felt this pain. And that's why I took it upon myself to make something. So I wrote, and I'll share this with everybody. And this is, I'll say this: it's naive, it's a quick implementation, but it works really well. What this is a service worker, because service workers are built into SvelteKit. It's a service worker that basically does stale while revalidate using IndexedDB. So it takes right now it's just queries. It takes any remote function query, because I can identify those. It takes any remote function query and saves it to IndexedDB. On the next page load, if it's being done on the client side, it's going to check IndexedDB and just load that data. So it's basically like a local IndexedDB cache that I don't even have to do anything in my code, because it's a service worker. It's just there. It worked really well. I wrote this, and I'm not good with service workers, and it's a pretty small implementation, 150 lines. I do need version numbering needed. I chatted with CJ about this yesterday, but man, it works really stinking good, man. You're doing massive amounts of data loading within 10 milliseconds, because it's just there. It is it's the not local first, but it's the local data cache lessons I learned from using something like Zero, just tossed into an automatic service worker.
That's great.
Yeah, I was pretty stoked about this working well.
That's similar to what I did on my side as well, but I did this on the server. So I stuck everything in a key value store, and then as part of my data fetching strategy, I just first checked if it was there. But that doesn't help the fact that the actual component itself has to re-render in.
Well, sure, yeah.
If you want, if you want to server render and cache an entire page, and then go from page to page, then you're in trouble. That's a hard problem. I don't envy anyone that has to work on this caching stuff because it's a can of worms. And its edge cases all the way down. It kind of sucks to have to work
cache
with it.
and DNS and what are all the things? Yeah, those are...
Cache ruins everything around. We got to make that shirt. I have a rule, no funny shirts. But man, that would be a good funny shirt.
Yes. I mean, Wu-Tang is for the children, so I think it qualifies.
Beautiful. Well, I'm excited to see all of this implemented in the new syntax site because... this was one of the biggest qualms I had with Svelte, and they have done a fantastic job at solving that.
Yeah. Yeah, I it's one of those ones that after it was announced, I had so much on my plate that I didn't dive into it. And since diving into it, just a big fan of this implementation. I'll say this. I'm not saying no other RPC systems have done it as good as this, but it better be as good as this if you want me to use it. Because now I've been to the edge and back, and I very study. Yeah,
I don't think you would get better than this because it's tip to tail, right? SvelteKit has control over absolutely everything. For something where you just need to add RPC into an existing solution, that's where you probably would reach for one of these individual one. But man, is it nice having a meta framework where it just is tip to tail.
Yes.
Snout to hoof.
Snout to hoof. That's not that far of a distance if you think about it. No. Cool. Do you want to get into sick picks and shameless plugs?
Yes. All right. I'm going to sick pick my dishwasher. I talked about it in the last couple episodes. So I'm very happy with it, but we've had it for like almost a month now. And we got the Bosch 800 series dishwasher, and this thing is amazing. It's got the third row. I don't understand how they have more room in a dishwasher when it fits into the same physical one, like the 24-inch thing in your kitchen. But this thing is awesome. So if you're looking for a new dishwasher and you're tired of fussing with them, like we have a house, we have a cottage, we had our old house. Like I have fixed enough dishwashers in my day that I know do not buy the $500 LG. LG does make good ones. They're a higher up there, but man, it's a nice life improvement if you can get a nice dishwasher. So our old one lasted for 21 years.
Yeah.
And we pulled it out. We're like, yeah, we'll just buy another one of those. So sick pick.
Nice. I'm going to sick pick my new cold brew setup. Man, I've been making my own cold brew for a while. And when you make cold brew, like, there's a number of things that can go wrong. It can get really bitter really quick and can get really like burnt tasting. And I like went deep on like, what am I doing wrong? Because I was just kind of suffering through mediocre coffee when I drink good cold brew other places. I know it's possible. Like, why can't I dial this in? So I dialed it in. I am now measuring my beans. I'm doing 7 ounces of beans per coffee sock. So the sick pick one part is going to be a coffee sock. It's basically just like a cotton sock that you put the beans in. And I do that in this is a 64 ounce mason jar. You can buy a kit that comes, I'll have a link to this.
Yeah.
You can buy a kit that comes with the mason jar and the coffee sock. Now the key to this all is you brew it either in the fridge or on the counter for like 24 hours, right? You do this 6 to 8 ounces, you put it in the coffee sock, you fill it with water, but the key ends up being a double filter. So after you're done with that, I then have another glass thing, and I pour through one of those Chemex filters. I don't have like a fancy setup, but the Chemex filters are just these paper filters, and you double filter it through the paper filter. And then I do that into like a giant glass pitcher. And man, it tastes like Starbucks cold brew. It tastes like the stuff that I buy in the store. It is perfect. Wow. It solves every issue that I've ever had with cold brew. The two things that are important is like the double filtering is a massive one, and then the amount of time that I'm brewing plus the amount of beans. But let me tell you, it's been really great. And now it's so much more economic. We have like economical. I don't know what those. Either way, we buy a big old thing of beans from Costco. You ground them up. You put them in the thing overnight, and then a big thing that was important to me was that it had to be all glass on glass the whole process, because so many of the options out there are like plastic filters or plastic brewing systems. There's one cold brew like system that's like a countertop machine that is really just concentrated cold brew pods that it's mixing with water. It's like, what's the point of that?
Who's buying that?
They're expensive too. It's like, what's the point? So yeah,
man, I for the longest time I wanted an espresso, and I finally got
we have
one.
Yes,
those things suck.
It's not for me.
It's yeah. Like it brews okay coffee, but like it's like $4 a pod.
Yeah.
And you got to buy the special ones, and there's DRM in it, and like, no thanks.
Yes.
You know, like beans are not that expensive. And if you can just figure out how not to be an idiot and do a little bit of research like Scott just did, you can make some wicked coffee at home without being like an obnoxious coffee person.
Big old bag of beans. Doesn't matter what, because cold brew especially doesn't matter. Normal beans, but yeah, I get whatever is on sale at Costco that's decent, crunch it up, and then I do 2 64-ounce ones because we consume a lot. And then I put it into a big glass thing, and it's glass on glass on glass the entire way down. Glass, cotton, paper. That's it. So
beautiful. Dope. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you later.
Peace.